And what do you have in the kitchen? People always ask me, how do you stock up the kitchen in terms of appliances? It doesn't have to be complicated. Usually the things I use the most, I use a very simple blender, a little small little blender for my dressings and sauces. I live alone now, so I just make my dressings and sauces in a little one-person use, and I use it over 2 days. And that's what I use. But sometimes I'll whip out my big blender at what you're going to use to make a soup, or you're going to use to make something more big, like a just bigger quantity. Those would be one of those big blenders that you could have too. And then a chopping board and a good knife is really important, really helpful. And, an immersion blender is nice if you're making a soup and you want to make it pureed, or if you want to make it for hummus. That's a great thing to have. I use my food processor when I'm making hummus. I love to make my own hummus. I sometimes use the electric pressure cooker or the slow cooker. I rarely use. A lot of people love the slow cooker. That's something a lot of people have, but you don't need to have all these things. My favorite tool in my kitchen happens to be this oven. That's the oh my gosh, I'm blanking on the name of it. It's my favorite. Did I write it down? It's my favorite thing because it is, I cook for myself now. And so it's really nice to have this little oven. I don't have to heat up the whole big oven. And I make everything. I bake everything in there. I bake my potatoes and all that. Oh, it's a Breville Smart Oven. It's an air fryer. It bakes, it toasts, it does everything. And so for 1 or 2 people in a house, or even if you're just trying to make something quick, it's a great tool to have. But you could have, some pots and pans. Having a good pot and pan is really helpful. Having a colander, measuring cups and spoons is important, especially if you're just learning how to cook, or if you're just trying to make, if you're just not used to how much something should be. I always use my measuring cups and measuring spoons. Large wooden spoons, a ladle, tongs, a whisk, baking sheets, oven mitts. Those are nice staples. And then if you want, you can have a citrus reamer or a citrus press. You can have a spiralizer, a spiral slicer, a mandolin. You can get more fancy and have like a milk frother if you want to make a do-it-yourself latte and save a lot of money from going out to the store and getting it. Those are just some of the things you could use. But the air fryers are very popular right now. You could do all sorts of fun things with an air fryer, and a dehydrator if you like to do, if you're on a raw diet, or if you want to experiment with dehydrating things, that could be super fun. But really, if you have a knife and a cutting board and maybe a blender and definitely a pot or pan, you can do anything plant-based. I used to have to use this slide. I've used this slide since that last book, since many books ago, but I don't even have to say it anymore. But any recipe now, if you just want to take a standard recipe, you can swap things in and plantify them. So there's a wall of plant milks now. It's not just, it used to be rice milk or soy milk, and now it's soy milk, almond milk, cashew milk. The oat milk is really popular. Cashew milk is my favorite right now. And they all offer different things. So again, I like the unsweetened and I like to keep the unflavored, but they all offer different things nutritionally and culinarily speaking. Soy and cashew tend to be creamier. Almonds a little lighter. Rice is a little grainier. Hemp milk is a little grainier and really nutritious because it's got all those omega-3 fats in there. Depends on what you're looking for. Depends on what you like. It doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be perfect. You're not drinking milk for the nutrition. If you are, you can get one. Most of them are now fortified with B12 and calcium and D. So that's a good source to get the calcium and vitamin D like you would from milk without all the harmful effects of milk. Egg replacements. Oh my goodness. We used to make, chia seed or flaxseed. You added 1 part of the seed to 3 parts water, and it turns into very egg-like substance that you could use in different recipes. It depends on the recipes. I bake with bananas or applesauce or other fruit purees or vegetable purees like a pumpkin puree to replace the eggs. They kind of do all sorts of interesting things culinarily speaking, but there's also so many egg replacements now. So you can replace all of them. There's so many different options now for if you're making an omelet or if you're baking with it. There's so many different options now. Cheese, oh my goodness, there's so many cheeses out there. I tend to love, there's a lot of great things on the marketplace for the decadent versions, because a lot of them have coconut oil, a lot of them have some heavy saturated fat things in there. So you want to be careful of those, but use those as treat foods. But when I'm entertaining and I have I'm trying to experiment with those charcuterie boards. So I'll do 2 different hummus, and I'll do maybe a Miyoko's cheese in the middle and a lot of vegetables and guacamole. And so I will include that because most of my friends locally are not vegan necessarily. So I like to allure them in with those products. But I'm a fan of what I'm going to have on my Fiesta cauliflower rice is a nacho cheese sauce that you blend up in the blender. It's so delicious, based on nuts and seeds with nutritional yeast, nooch, love the nooch, and some spices, and they're delicious. They go so well on everything. They make everything so yummy. Those are fun to experiment with and super healthy. Great way to get in your nuts and seeds for the day. And then if you're looking for a meaty texture in a recipe, you can use tofu and tempeh. You could use mushrooms again. Miso gives that umami flavor. So do sun-dried tomatoes. That's a really important thing in a well-rounded palate. So that's something to consider as well. And I like to think of recipes, I like to Nutrify recipes. So eat all the foods on a bed of greens, or add them over greens, or add them over salad. I always throw in greens on everything because I put out my green goggles, and like for my kids when they were little, or when I could cook for them, I always add broccoli to their pasta because they love, they're pastatarians, my kids, or casseroles or grain dish. It's always just try to think of how you could throw in the greens. It's great because it could be an afterthought, right? You cook up a huge soup or stew, and at the very end, you just throw the greens in and wilt them. It takes a minute, and then you've got all that nutritiousness added to that recipe. And it tastes, you don't really notice them after a while, or you do, and you love them. Using whole grains instead of refined grains is always beneficial because you want the intact whole grain with all that fiber. You could sprinkle nuts and seeds over dishes if you're not using your nuts and seeds as a dressing or sauce. And another way to nutrify foods is to sprout them. Sprouting grains or legumes or nuts and seeds will make it so that those nutrients are more easily absorbed, like especially some of those minerals. It just helps with the absorption. So that's something to consider playing with too, or buying them sprouted themselves. Dining out and travel, I'll talk about briefly, unless anyone wants to ask me questions about them. But some of my best tips for traveling and dining out while plant-based is check ahead of time. We've got those wonderful apps like Happy Cow or Yelp, and you can look up where you can look up vegan or vegetarian or plant-based, and it will show you wherever you are in the world, options near you. And it's always an option to go to a store, almost always an option to go to a store or a farmer's market and get the foods you want and eat whatever you want. But there's also restaurants that you can kind of find just by looking ahead of time. I love that there's so many options now. And wherever you go, sometimes the best restaurants are like, there's all these great vegan restaurants, especially here in LA, we have a lot of options. Sometimes it's harder to get the healthier foods then. You can get all sorts of delicious, decadent foods. But sometimes, like if I go to a steakhouse, where was I? I went to a restaurant with my son yesterday, and we just order side dishes. You just kind of put together the side dishes, and they have like the best side dishes. And that's a great way to get some healthy, nutritious foods on the go. If you're traveling, you could bring a can opener, and you could bring a food container so they can go to a market and just grab a salad that's easy, and grab a can of beans and open the can. Or now they have those tetracycle packs of beans or bags of beans. You could just cut them open or rip them open, and you have that. You can get some vinegar, some salsa, you can have a healthy dish on the go. So that's easy. You can try to get a hotel room with a microwave. Most hotel rooms will give you a refrigerator, so you could bring food with you. Depends on if you're traveling by plane or by car, because if you're traveling by car, you could pack a whole cooler full of food. You could bring baked potato or unbaked potatoes and microwave them. There are so many easy ways to eat on the go now that it doesn't have to be, like you can't eat out and you can't eat when you're traveling. You could bring some of your favorite sauces or condiments. They now have these little travel packs. I sometimes tend to travel with hot sauce. If you've seen me on a plane, I always have a hot sauce or chili flakes or something like that because I like spice on my food. But there are options everywhere now. So back to this plate. This is an example of what you should think about overall in terms of a healthy food. But you can get all of your nutrition here with an incredible array of disease-fighting and health-promoting nutrients. And it's healthy because of what you're avoiding. It's what you're eating, all of this, and what you're avoiding by not having animal products and not having the refined and processed foods. And you're avoiding excessive saturated fat and excessive amino acids, excessive iron. I spent the first 10 years of my career defending the nutrient adequacy of a plant-based diet, but I've come to look at the research on health span and longevity, and it seems like you're actually healthier on a plant-based diet, perhaps because of what is naturally limited in these foods.